Hello fellow YouTubers, and welcome to episode 18, reading my first self-published novel, Aggravation. Through the gates now, and Clyde brought his vehicle to a stop. There wasn't a vehicle approaching in either direction, but because Clyde had noticed the gates continuing to move as he drove through, he wondered if the gates would be returned to their original positions. It was irrelevant, of course. He knew that. But he just had to satisfy his curiosity. They did. Clyde smiled and thought as he drove away, I bet it was the sisters. Yep, no doubt about it. A place for everything, and everything in its place. Half an hour later, in the kitchen of Clyde's house, Sandy and Clyde were tucking into their third toasted cheese, tomato and onion sandwich, with two more toasting between the hot plates of the sandwich maker. A pot of tea had already been drained, but by the time the sandwiches were ready, the second pot would be ready to pour. Picking up the packet of valerian tablets, Sandy said, I take it was these that put you to sleep. Clyde nodded and said, yeah, but only after I took 4 of them. You see, I had taken one, but it didn't have any effect, so I took another not long after. And when it still didn't feel any different, I took 2 more. And the rest, as they say, is history, eh? Sandy said, eyeballing Clyde. Mocking coyness, Clyde quipped, no fool like an old fool, I guess. Placing the packet of valerian tablets on the tabletop, Sandy took a bite of the second half of his third sandwich, chewed, swallowed, then said, I think I should phone Alma and let her know I'm okay. Alone in the kitchen, Clyde turned off the sandwich maker, removed the 2 sandwiches from it, cut them in half, placed the halves on the 2 used plates, poured 2 mugs of tea, then placed the plates and mugs on the table and took to his chair. It was 10 after 4, he noticed, glancing at his watch, and he thought, what a night, and what a story it will make. A short story, to be sure, but that's neither here nor there. After all, it's not so much how many words that's important, but rather the way in which the story is told. Look at H.G. Wells' stories. They're short, but, by jingo, they're damn good nevertheless. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, too. At that moment, Sandy returned to the kitchen, sat down and said, Alma was awake. Said she'd been awake on and off since I left. Sandy shrugged. Oh well, that's a woman for you. Suddenly Sandy sat bolt upright, his eyes wide. And for a moment Clyde thought he was having some sort of attack. Only to realise that he was staring at something behind him. And he said, what is it, Sandy? Then when Sandy pointed, Clyde turned side on and was greeted with, hello, Clyde Phillymore, one of the sisters said. And he flinched. He wasn't afraid, but the sudden sight of Henrietta and Harriet standing behind him startled him momentarily. But he quickly recovered and, finding his voice, said, hello, I'm Harriet, the sister to his left said. And I'm Henrietta, the sister to his right said. And this is my very good friend Sandy Merriweather, Clyde responded straight away. Hello, Sandy Merriweather, the sisters chorused. Sandy smiled and finger waved but didn't say anything, mainly because he wasn't capable of speaking at that particular strange moment in time. To Clyde, the sisters reminded him of, well, he wasn't quite sure who they reminded him of. Perhaps a young Mia Farrow, or maybe it was Gwyneth Paltrow, or was it Fay Ray? But whoever it was, there were 2 things he knew for certain. They were beautiful and young. But then that's how Clyde had always envisaged them to be. Sandy, however, couldn't get over the remarkable change in their appearance when compared to only a few hours ago. Not only had they been a shadow of what they were now, but also as he remembered them as they were in their later years. So seeing them young and beautiful was a new and profoundly rewarding experience, and he delighted in it. Not so Clyde, though. Oh no, Clyde was captivated by them. To him, they were the personification of all that is good and right and wholesome. And to be able to look upon them now dressed in their finery and wearing their sun hats, so happy and carefree and, yes, seemingly so alive, made all the pain and suffering he and Sandy had just experienced so worthwhile and fulfilling, and his spirit soared. "I'm so glad you came," Clyde said. "I was hoping that you would after I missed you the first time, but I didn't know if you would have to pass over straight away or not. So well, I didn't know what to expect." "Of course we would come," Henrietta said, then smiled. "We owe the both of you so much for what you did. So very, very much. Without your bravery, my sister and I would have been lost and destined to be haunted and unable to rest for ever and a day. Thank you, Clyde. Thank you, Sandy." It was a heartfelt thank you. Sandy and Clyde knew that, and it was all they expected. Nothing more or nothing less. "You're more than welcome," Clyde said. "Isn't that right, Sandy?" Sandy was still somewhat mesmerised by the sister's presence, and for a long moment he hesitated in answering, finally saying, "Yes, yes it is. Glad I was able to help." "He's being modest," Clyde said. "For if it hadn't been for him, I don't think the two of you would be standing here right now." "Don't be daft, Clyde. After all, it was you who got the ball rolling." "See what I mean?" Clyde said, looking at the sisters. "To hear him talking, you think it only came along for the ride. But believe me, if it wasn't for my dear friend there, I reckon I'd be dead. And don't you dare say different, Sandy." Harriet said, "How fortunate you are to have such a friend, Clyde. So very fortunate indeed. Fortunately, I too had and still have such a friend, and I know how important it is to be blessed so." Clyde half expected Henrietta to mimic Sandy and say, "Don't be daft." But she only looked at her sister and smiled. A smile that said thank you as much as it said you humble me. "She too is being modest," Harriet said. Clyde smiled, thinking, there's a lot I'd like to ask them, but there's one thing in particular, although I'm not sure if I should ask. But then, why not? After all, nothing ventured, nothing gained, and besides, if I don't ask, I'll never get another opportunity. So not being one to beat around the bush, Clyde asked, "What's it like being a ghost?" I knew he was going to ask that, Sandy thought. I goddamn knew it. Harriet looked at her sister, Henrietta likewise. Then Harriet nodded. Then a second or two later, Henrietta said, "In one word, empty. You see, Clyde, as a ghost you have no substance, no wants or needs that were all too commonplace when living. The need to sleep and eat and drink, for example. Nor do you pine for the things you no longer have and left behind. This house is a prime example of that. To Harriet and me it is but a familiar place. Nothing more, nothing less. Some, however, like my sister and I, had a hunger and thirst for the hereafter that was denied us. When the majority of people die, they cross over straight away. But many, like Harriet and me, are haunted by a demon preventing them from doing so, while others are haunted by those they left behind because they refuse to let them go, while others still have unfinished business to attend to. They, above all others, constitute the spirit world. So many lost souls, Clyde, Sandy, so many lost souls, destined to roam for an eternity, unable to put pay to their particular wants." Clyde asked, "The lost souls, would it be fair to assume they are responsible for the majority of hauntings?" Harriet replied, "Invariably, yes." "But what I can't understand," Clyde said, "is how the demon prevented you from crossing over at any given time. I mean, I know what you mean," Henrietta said. "How is he able to always be there?" Clyde nodded. "All spirits possess an aura of energy, but a demon's energy is all-powerful. So when the door thereafter opens and summons those who wish to cross over, the demon or demons are always the first to be there ready and waiting to force their will on you. However, there are times when a spirit lacks the energy to travel to the doorway, which, I might add, is not always open, because they had materialised and made themselves known to those still living. Thank you, Clyde said. Then, but why is a demon's energy any different from a normal spirit? Harriet answered, because Lucifer endows them with it. The spirit world, you see, is a realm of good and bad spirits, but only the souls of those who are evil in the real world can Lucifer force his will upon. So they are truly the damned then, Clyde said. Yes, Harriet said. They are destined to the fires of hell regardless of their obedience to Lucifer. No second chances, eh, Clyde said. No, Harriet and Henrietta replied in unison. There were countless questions Clyde wanted to ask, but he decided not to pursue them, for it just didn't feel right for him to do so for some reason. There was, however, one thing he wanted to know, and he said, if someone else had bought this house, would you have sought help from them? Only if they had possessed the same aura as you, Henrietta said. Clyde felt himself blush slightly as he nodded and smiled. At that moment the sisters looked at Sandy, and Harriet asked, is there anything you would like to know, Sandy? Sandy shook his head and said, oh, no. No, I don't think so, thank you. Very well then, Harriet said. But before we say goodbye, is there anything we can do for you? Clyde looked at Sandy. Sandy at Clyde. And Clyde said, well, yes. Yes, there is, as a matter of fact. When Clyde opened his eyes early or late Sunday morning, or maybe it was the afternoon, he didn't know which, nor could he be bothered rolling over to look at the time. He was surprised to find that he was feeling pretty good considering what he had subjected his body to. After he and Sandy had said their final goodbyes to the sisters, Clyde had expected Sandy to call it at night and head for home, and while Sandy had expected Clyde to call it quits. And when neither happened, both sat at the kitchen table drinking tea and reliving the extraordinary events of the past 5 hours, of which both agreed the appearance of Harriet and Henrietta had been the most extraordinary event of all. Perhaps even more extraordinary was that both men were feeling so good in body and mind. In fact, Clyde's teeth and back had ceased to ache, and Sandy's wrist had but the slightest twinge of pain only now and again, and even then it was no cause for concern. Sandy was feeling so good that he refused Clyde's offer to be driven home when he felt it time to do so just after sunrise, and now, like Clyde, was lying in bed feeling just fine and dandy, as if he could take on the rest of the world. But when Alma brought him a cup of tea and he went to sit up, that's the moment he realised he wasn't a kid anymore. Far from it, in fact. Bloody hell, Alma, he whined and winced in pain as his wife looked on. I'm as stiff as a board, I am. And with that said, Sandy lay down again. Of course you are, you silly bugger. And it's not surprising with what you told me happened at the cemetery. Oh, leave off, will you, Alma? I'm feeling bad enough as it is, without you reminding me of it. I know you are, my love, Alma said sympathetically. So how about I rub you down with deep heat, eh? That'd be good, Alma. Real good. 200 metres southwest as the crow flies, as Alma was rubbing her ailing husband down, Clyde, feeling the need to relieve himself, cast aside the bed covers in preparation to throw his legs over the edge of the bed. But alas, what he was thinking he could do was totally different to what he was physically capable of doing, and he didn't need to raise his head off of the pillow to know it. Nevertheless, he knew it would only be a matter of time before his need would become urgent. So he had no option but to drag his stiff and aching body out of bed. 10 minutes later he had managed to do that and was sitting on the toilet to do what he would normally do standing up. 5 minutes later he was back in bed. He had considered grabbing a tube of deep heat while sitting on the toilet, but then dismissed the idea. He was just too stiff to apply it. And besides, even if he managed, which he doubted, to rub down those areas close at hand, he'd be left with a residue in his hands that could prove a potential hazard to his eyes and other places as well. So Sunday for Sandy and Clyde was one of bed rest. Made all the easier for Sandy because he had someone to dote over him. Clyde, however, had to fend for himself as best he could when he needed it the most. At least that was what he expected he would have to do. He was, however, on Alma's mind. Her husband was feeling the effects of his labours and was confined to bed, and it was fair to assume Clyde would be too. And he had no one to lend a helping hand. She thought of phoning him first, but didn't know if he had a phone close to his bed. So she decided to pay a visit unannounced. After telling Sandy of her intentions, Sandy told her to go around to the back of the house because there was every chance the back door was unlocked. She didn't bother to ask why that was so. 10 minutes later she found that it was. "Hello, Clyde, it's Alma," she said loud and clear, stepping into the laundry. "I've just come to see how you're faring," she said, entering the kitchen. This was the first time Alma had visited Clyde, but she knew where the master bedroom was and headed straight for it. "I'm in my bedroom, Alma," she heard Clyde say as she walked the hallway. "Last door on your left." The bedroom door was open and she stepped through it, saying, "Afternoon, Clyde. You feeling the worse for wear too?" "Oh yes. Can't remember feeling this bad ever. I can tell you. How's Sandy?" "Stiff as a board and resting in bed." "Poor bugger," Clyde said. "I know exactly how he feels." Standing at Clyde's side of the bed, Alma asked, "Have you had anything to eat or drink?" "No, nothing. I'm so stiff and sore I don't think I'd be capable of making my way to the kitchen, let alone preparing a meal." "I'll fix you something," Alma said without hesitation. "And before I go, I'll put something to nibble and drink on the bedside cabinet, just to tide you over till morning. Then I'll pop over to see how you're getting on." "Thank you, Alma. You're an angel for doing this. Truly you are." Smiling, Alma said, "Get off with you. And besides, what are friends for?" Alma didn't waste any time frying up half a dozen rashers of bacon, 2 eggs and a sliced tomato, finishing the meal off with 2 buttered slices of toast. She had no idea how hungry Clyde was, but if he couldn't eat it all in one sitting, then he could finish it off later on. After delivering the meal on a tray and helping Clyde to sit up, Alma returned to the kitchen to brew a pot of tea. There was a little washing up that needed to be done, so while she waited for the tea to draw, she took care of it. Returning to the bedroom then with 2 mugs of tea, she was relieved to notice that Clyde had an appetite, for the meal, save for 2 rashers of bacon, was gone. "Feel any better?" Alma asked, sitting on the edge of the bed, mug of tea in hand. "A lot better, thank you. But why does a meal cooked by someone else always taste better than when you cook the same meal yourself?" "I don't know," Alma said, "but it does, doesn't it?" Placing the tray to one side, Clive sipped his tea, then said, "I've been meaning to ask you this for some time, Alma, but I haven't had the chance. But I was wondering what your thoughts might be on the sisters' writings. Assuming that you read them, of course." Alma sipped the tea, then said without hesitation, "I did, and I believe it all, Clyde. Have for some time, as a matter of fact." She sipped the tea again, then continued, "I never knew about the abuse, but I guess it's not the sort of thing you'd want to talk about to an outsider, even if that outsider was a friend." Incredulous, Clyde said, "You were friends with the sisters?" "Yes, probably the only friend they had, with the exception of Dr. Saunders." She paused momentarily as if remembering, smiled and said, "Yet it came about out of sheer coincidence. I had just commenced selling Avon products not long before Christmas 1980, and I was delivering catalogues to the homes in this street and leaving them at the front door." Sticky page again. "Anyhow, when I came to MacArthur House, I was a little reluctant at first about leaving a catalogue because of the sisters' aversions to people. But then I thought, why not? After all, nothing ventured, nothing gained. But just as I placed the catalogue on the doormat, the front door opened and a voice said, 'Ding dong.' Avon calling. And when I looked up, Henrietta was standing there all smiles. I didn't know it was Henrietta at the time, mind you, but I quickly learned how to tell the two of them apart, on account of Harriet having a dimple just above her right eyebrow. Anyhow, to cut a long story short, that's how I befriended Harriet and Henrietta, and they turned out to be my best customers bar none. I came across half a dozen boxes filled with empty Avon bottles, jars and tubes when I cleaned out the house, Clyde said. And there are a whole host of different Avon products that had never been opened and are still here. Clyde shrugged and pulled a face. I just couldn't bring myself to throw them out. Alma smiled, sipped her tea and said, I had a feeling they were buying far more than they could possibly use, the dear old souls. Do you think they did that to make you happy and to make sure you kept visiting their house? Clyde asked. Partially, I suspect, but I would have been more than happy to continue visiting them regardless. In fact, I look forward to it. They were always generally delighted to see me, inviting me inside to sit and partake of tea and freshly made scones with lashings of strawberry jam and cream, while talking about whatever popped into their heads. It was during one such talk that they told me of their close encounter, going on to describe in detail what they had written down. I was a little sceptical to begin with, but when they continued to bring up the subject time and time again, I became convinced that what they were telling me was true beyond a shadow of a doubt. And I've been a believer ever since, much to Sandy's dismay. Yes, Sandy, Clyde said affectionately. Although with what he has just experienced firsthand, I doubt he'd be anywhere near as sceptical as he once was. Certainly not about the supernatural. No, Alma said. As for UFOs and close encounters, well, that remains to be seen. Clyde chuckled and said, I can't wait to see the look on his face when we locate that pyramid buried inside Tall Hill. So you two believe it's there? No doubt in my mind whatsoever, Alma. No doubt at all. After draining her mug, Alma said, Suppose I should wash these things up and set you right before I head off home. But other than that, is there anything else you need? No, thank you, Alma. Although there is one thing I'd like to know, and that's how long your friendship with the sisters lasted. You mean, was I still friends with them toward the end of their lives? Sadly, no. I continued to see them for a number of years after I finished with Avon, making a habit of calling in on them to say hello and spend a little time with them. But for some reason they began to gradually alienate themselves from me, and I never knew why. I put it down to being just one of those things that was peculiar to old age. You know, a mindset for whatever reason, only known to them, but I really don't know. Sandy said it was because they were eccentric and a little loopy, so what did I expect? And maybe he was right. Yes, well, Sandy would say that, Clyde said. Alma shrugged. It's his explanation for anyone who he thinks is a little odd. She shrugged. But what does he know, eh? Before leaving, and much to Clyde's surprise, Alma kissed his left cheek, her lips lingering a second or two before drawing away and saying a heartfelt, Thank you. It was all that needed to be said. Clyde and Sandy managed to go out of bed Monday morning, but both were plagued with aches and pain that still made the simplest of tasks a stark reminder to what they had always taken for granted. To sit on a high-lead kitchen chair was a drawn-out affair for both men, as it was when it came to sit on the toilet and right themselves after. And any thought of taking to the favourite lounge room chair was quickly dismissed when they found it physically impossible to lower themselves into it. Both men were able to stand and urinate, albeit awkwardly, and every time they raised an arm in order to drink from a mug or glass, their hand trembled uncontrollably. Why, even the simple action of taking in a deep breath, then letting it out in a drawn-out sigh of frustration was painful. Yes, indeed, Clyde and Sandy were paying dearly for their act of unparalleled daring-do. Later that morning, as promised, Alma called in on Clyde and was happy to see him up and about. She well understood how he must feel if her husband's whinging, whining and cursing was anything to go by, even though it was but his nature to behave so. In fact, if he didn't carry on so, she'd know for certain that there was something seriously wrong with him. Clyde too suspected she wouldn't be adverse to letting those about him know how much he was suffering. But then, from Alma's experience, all men were created equal when it came to pain, for they were nothing but a bunch of big sooks, as far as she was concerned. Clyde had hoped she would take up the offer of a cup of tea so he could talk some more about the sisters, but she politely refused. Perhaps some other time, he thought. He didn't really know what he could learn about them that he wasn't already aware of. But sometimes a previously unknown snippet of information comes forth when you least expect it in general conversation. After seeing Alma off, and with nothing better to do, Clyde decided to go back to bed and read and nap if the urge presented itself. It did. 3 times no less. But just after 4 in the afternoon, when at a time Clyde was napping for the 3rd time, Julian Curtis said to his mother, "I'm going outside to play with my basketball, Mum." "All right, my darling," his mother said. With that, Julian stepped out the back door, clutching the basketball to his side, where, in less than 30 seconds, he began to bounce the ball on and along the length of the concrete driveway. Ping, 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 ping. The noise music to the child's ears. Ping, 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 ping. But not to Clyde, who, suddenly roused by the all too familiar aggravating him, cursed under his breath, "You goddamn rotten little shit." It was a natural reaction for Clyde, even though he had an ace up his sleeve, although he was uncertain if the card would be played at this particular time. He need not have concerned himself. After reaching the end of the driveway and still bouncing the ball, ping, 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 Julian turned and retraced his steps to the rear corner of the house. Ping, 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 ping. But the moment he entered the shadow cast by the front of the shed, 2 apparitions suddenly appeared out of thin air and Julian froze on the spot in terror. The basketball forgotten as it dropped to the concrete surface at his feet, pinged twice then rolled towards the street. In fact, Julian's mind was a total blank as he stared wide-eyed, open-mouthed at the 2 ghosts. The release from his bladder, a reflex action that didn't require any thought process whatsoever. "Your noise has woken us again," Henrietta said. "Time and time again your infernal noise wakes my sister and me from our graves. But do you care?" Tears welled in Julian's eyes and he trembled, his mouth so dry that he was unable to swallow the lump in his throat that was his heart. "Look at him, my sister. He doesn't care that he wakes the dead. Do you?" The volume of the last 2 words made Julian flinch so dramatically that he almost fell backwards. "Do you? Do you?" Henrietta insisted. Tears flowed as Julian nodded his head and kept on nodding. He wanted to scream, "Mom!" but the word got stuck in his throat and wouldn't budge. Harriet said, "If you care then you must promise not to make that god-awful sound again. That and that equally aggravating sound you make with that paddle. Promise?" Somehow Julian managed to blubber, "I promise, I promise." "Go then," Henrietta said. "But if you break your word, we'll be back. And if we have to do that, may God have mercy on your soul." Julian took to his heels quicker than a rat up a drainpipe, leaving behind a puddle on the concrete and 2 smiling faces that disappeared as quickly as they had materialised only minutes before. Finding his voice as he neared the back door, screaming, "Mum! Mum!" Clyde was smiling too at the sound of Julian's pleas. But when he heard, "What has he done to you now?" he burst out laughing, which, although it made his abdomen hurt like hell, was well worth the immense satisfaction he gained from it. But what happened next he had not expected. Just as he got his laughter under control, he heard a hammering on the front door. And straight away he knew who it was. Bloody woman. he mumbled as he slowly eased out of bed, the persistent hammering getting his back up as he shuffled toward the door. "Hold your horses," he said as he turned the doorknob. "How dare you hammer on my door?" Clyde said, testily, looking at the red face on the other side of the screen door. "Who do you think you are, for Christ's sake?" "Who do I think I am? Who the hell do you think you are to be scaring my son, you fucking cranky shit of a man? Mind your manners, woman, and wake up to yourself. Don't you tell me what to do, you. Shut up, you imbecile. Your lily-livered husband isn't gave enough to confront you, but I certainly am, so shut the fuck up." Her face was beetroot red. She was breathing heavily through her mouth, arms akimbo, as if she was ready to explode. But she didn't speak. "Thank you," Clyde said. "Now calmly tell me what's bothering you. You scared the living daylights out of Julian, that's what." "I most certainly did not." Holding up a hand to fend off a rebuke, Clyde continued. "I haven't been outside this house for 2 days, let alone anywhere near Julian. So instead of jumping the gun and storming over here, it would have been worth your while to ask your son what happened. You're a liar. And you are a psychopath in serious need of professional help. Remember that," said Clyde, closed the door in her face. I want to thank you for watching and listening, or just listening, your eyes closed. And until next time, bye for now.